Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Nate Bailey is a best-selling author as well as a serial entrepreneur. He is a natural leader and a speaker who knows how to impact and reach an audience. He has built multiple successful businesses in several different fields. He recently fulfilled his longtime dream of selling his insurance agency to become a full-time coach. Nate was a lieutenant serving our country in the United States Army. As a platoon leader during Operation Iraqi Freedom, Nate was charged with the safety and leadership of 42 soldiers as they served our country in Kuwait. Nate has a simple philosophy on life. You live what you teach. Nate sees what needs to be done, and he does it. He pushes his teams to the max, and he makes sure he's always leading from the front by pushing himself one step beyond. He is the author of the book 100 Mile Mindset and the host of the very successful Championship Leadership podcast. Nate Bailey, what an honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Hey, what's up, Casey? Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's such an honor to welcome you to the show. I was just telling you before how much I really love your podcast. One of the things I really love about our podcast is the theme music, which you can't hear. The guests can't hear on their end, but it's actually like playing through right now.
Yeah, okay.
And I really like my track, and it's kind of fun to, play it and think of all the wonderful and amazing conversations I've been able to have. But your opening track is incredible.
Dude. Yeah, I gotta thank you. I gotta give a shout out to my man Joey Yak, the studio CEO for that one. He's incredible, and I had a short call with him, and he put all that together, and it's awesome.
That's amazing. Well, if you don't mind, I've never tried this before. I want to try it now. Yeah, here we go.
Let's go. In 05 and 06, I deployed to Kuwait. I used to wait every day for them to say, nature going home. I missed my life, missed my wife. 15 months, she was all alone. But when I got back, I felt out of control. Feeling entitled, I put my life on hold. I keep on drinking, so I'm sinking in a river.
It's just so good. It's so well done. I love it.
I love it.
That's fantastic. Super cool.
I get a lot of compliments on that, by the way. So yeah.
Well deserved. Whoever was responsible for that, definitely well deserved. It was very, very well done.
Yeah, he crushed it.
Before we go any further, just want to thank you for all of your service in defending our country. Did you always know you wanted to get into military?
No, not necessarily. Like, to be 100% honest, I probably maybe thought about it a little bit, but no, I wasn't like this dream from a young kid. I didn't have a lot of family members that were in the military. I did have an uncle that was in the Marine Corps, and so that was probably a little bit of what maybe piqued my interest. But I was really focused on sports and athletics, and like had this big dream to be a professional athlete sometimes. So that's probably why I never really considered the military growing up, because I was so focused on athletics. Not, it never actually happened, but, I did go on to play some college sports. So yeah.
What sports did you play?
I played football in college. I played just about anything I could play as a kid. I played 4 sports in high school, played kind of the main basketball, baseball, football, and track.
Wow. That's awesome. So when did you make the decision to join the military?
Well, it was funny enough. Once my athletic career came to a halt, after my last year of football, I still had a little time to go in college, and I was really just kind of looking for that next challenge, that next step, because especially as an athlete, you always have something to work towards. You always have these goals. You're used to having this team, this family that you're around, and in college, you never really realize like how much commitment and time is taken up when you're in a sport until you get out of it and you got all this time in your hand, and you kind of lose that team camaraderie. And for me, so it was like, man, I think I was looking to fill some of those gaps and those holes. And of course you go through the college hallways and there's recruiting posters all over the place. So I was like, let me check this out. And so, yeah, I joined the Army National Guard shortly after my football career ended in college. And really, it was a little bit for the benefits that they offered for schooling and things like that. But it was also because I was kind of looking for that next challenge to see if I had what it would take to make it through, to become a soldier.
Sure. Wow. When you look back at your deployment, do you have fond memories of that or more traumatic memories?
I don't necessarily have traumatic memories. We were in Kuwait, so it was a safe environment. Like we didn't see any combat. We were technically in a combat zone, but no combat had taken place in Kuwait since we were there in 2005, 2006, most of 2006. And really nothing had happened in Kuwait until prior until like, the original Gulf War. But, I was attached to a unit that I didn't belong to. So the very first time I met my platoon was day one of deployment, which was a bit nerve-wracking and, thinking about going on deployment, going away from home, leaving your family behind. And now you're responsible to lead 42 dudes that you've never met before is a little bit crazy. So there was, and then, some of the command that didn't necessarily like me, I think mostly because I was an outsider coming in. And so that made things rough a little bit. But other than that, yeah, the fondest memories I have are really just the relationships and the time that I got to spend getting to know my soldiers inside of my platoon. Being away is tough and challenging. We were gone for 15 months and time flies a lot when you're home and you're busy and you're doing things. But when you're deployed to a different country and you have a lot of time doing our job day in and day out to really kind of think about like what you're going to do when you get back home, it's kind of that Groundhog Day mentality, and it just really kind of slows time down.
Interesting. That can be good or bad. I think one of the questions I had for you, like, when I think about deployment, I think first of all, combat. And then second of all, like you're just, doing a ton of push-ups or something, you know what I mean? Like basic or something. What is the most surprisingly difficult thing about being deployed? Is it something you've already mentioned, like being away from home or having so much time?
Yeah, I would say the most difficult piece for me was just being away from home. And I think that was, for the most part, it for most people, right? Like, again, not having had to go through combat, that would definitely add a few different variables and factors to difficulty of being deployed. But yeah, I mean, you really get into a routine. We definitely did, right? We worked third shift. My platoon worked third shift. So, we would go to work, we would come back. A lot of us would, because of that time difference, it seemed to work pretty well between Kuwait and the Midwest, where, we'd get off shift, which was kind of like early evening back home. So it was a good time to connect with family members. And so we would do that. We actually, this is 2005, 2006. So I think I was using like Yahoo Messenger of all things. Like, I don't know why that was the thing that we used, but that's what we used, pretty much just like a text chat. Wow. And that was kind of the boom days of MySpace. And we had internet, but it wasn't the greatest internet in the world, but it was better than nothing, right? And then we would typically a lot of us would go and hit the gym and work out and then come back and maybe grab something to eat and go to sleep and wake up a bit before you had to go and do it again. So that was, just really settling into a routine. But yeah, the toughest part was, for the most part, just being away from home. I was in the Guard, right? We weren't active duty. We were a National Guard unit. So we all had lives and jobs and careers that we put on hold to come back here, versus active duty. That is their job, right? I mean, so it's just, that's a different variable. Active duty, it's like your job is to train and just be prepared for a deployment. And you go on deployment. Yeah, they still miss their family, I'm sure, but they're not necessarily putting the rest of their life on hold, right? Versus the National Guard, I had a business, so I had to figure out how to do that, how to put that on hold. So you're anxious to get back and get that going again. And so yeah, it was interesting.
And there's also difficulties coming back home after you've been away for so long. What things did you start to face and challenges that you encountered as soon as you got back?
Yeah, there is for, maybe less or more depending on who you are, right? But I was 30 years old. And so I like to say, man, I thought I had it figured out, but I realized now I'm 45 and I didn't know shit. Like, I just really didn't have it figured out. And I was even an officer and a platoon leader, leading other men. So, I knew some things, but coming back, I was married. We didn't have any kids, still married, by the way, but sometimes it's a miracle to think that we just had our 20th anniversary. So
Congrats.
So
That's so cool.
It's like kind of crazy when you think about it. 20 years is a long time, especially in today's day and age.
Wow.
But we didn't have any kids yet. We have 3 kids now. But again, being deployed and what I was talking about of like, man, you feel like you're missing out, right? Like so when I came back, for me, it was like, man, I almost tried to make up for lost time all at once. And so wasn't being the most responsible person in that manner, right? Just like drinking a lot and just maybe spending money frivolously. Make decent money over there. It's tax free, and so wasn't used to having that amount of money in my bank account. And then the fact of like not knowing how to reconnect with my wife, not thinking we needed to, and my wife, thought we did. And I think she was right. And, it was a simple example of like wanting to go to a marriage retreat. There's these retreats for veterans coming back from home to kind of readjust it into home and to reconnect with your wife. And I think at that point in time, I looked at that as like, that's for people that need it. Right. And like, we don't need that. That's like a sign of weakness potentially. Right. That's my mindset. And now, man, just looking back, I wish I would have took the time to do that and to have been a little bit more aware of other people. I was being really selfish, right? It was really kind of more all about me and like, hey, I was gone for 15 months. Like I deserve to do this and this, and not realizing that like, hey, my wife was home alone for 15 months doing all that, everything on her end by herself. So yeah, it was a challenge and an adjustment for me. And I think, it probably was for others. I haven't really talked too much about that with any other of my platoon soldiers, but I think the reality is that if I'm going through it, more than likely there was others that were encountering those similar situations, trying to get back home and get back into life.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I look back on my own life and I can recognize now where the real low point was. And I can remember it in great detail, but when I was going through it, I couldn't identify that as like a low point. Was there ever a low point that you found yourself, that turned into a turning point, and that you can look back on now and recognize like, yeah, that was the lowest spot right there?
Yeah, there's, for me, I think I don't know if it was like necessarily one moment, but it was coming back, not coming back, being selfish, all the things that I just talked about that started to create a little bit of a gap inside of our marriage. And then we started to have kids. And the one thing I've learned is that kids won't necessarily solve problems and issues that you have in a marriage. A lot of times I think it just magnifies them and oftentimes can make it worse. And then all of a sudden you have these kids, and now instead of trying to figure out what's going on in your marriage and put the focus on your relationship to get that where it needs to be, the focus will easily just go to the kids and be like, well, I'm just going to focus on the kids. And then, things just continue to snowball. And I was in some of the best shape coming out of deployment, again, because we had such a routine and we were working out every day and really kind of lost track of that. Shifted a lot of my energy and focus into my business, and then like, well, nothing else is really working. I'm going to put my head down and build my business and make money, and that'll make things right. And so again, I don't know that it was a moment more than it was a point where I just finally was like, enough is enough, and trying to figure it on my own and not being able to do it really well, and coming to the point where I was like, man, something needs to change. And that's kind of around the time that I came across a coach and a mentor that really resonated with me and what he was doing in the program that he had to help men like myself that were married, that were entrepreneurs and business owners, start to live the life that they desire inside, but don't know how to do it. And so that brought me to where I am today. That was 6 years ago. And at the time I was an insurance agent with a brokerage and had owned a CrossFit gym as well, and had some real estate, and was very spread out to today, doing what I do full time, which is being a coach and helping other men and women just like that coach 6 years ago helped me.
That's amazing. That's so cool that you'd want to go out and share that message with the world, and do something in a way that gives back in a way that was special for you. Part of your concept is championship leadership, and I really would love to ask you, what does that mean to you? How do you define that?
That's great, because I ask, if you listen to my podcast, that's like my first question: what does that mean to them? So it's kind of fun to be able to answer that question.
I've got a few of them for you. I got a few of your signature questions I'm going to turn on you.
All right. I know I've already noticed a few of them here. Championship leadership to me is really, yes, setting the standard, right? There's a standard, and then like a bare minimum, right? And then there's championship leaders. They don't just meet the standard, they exceed it, right? So that if they're tired, they're fatigued, things are going hard in life, which they do all the time, they're prepared to not just be able to meet the minimum, but to be able to exceed it in those times. Because, when you're tired, you might not be able to perform at 100%. So you can still at all times at least cover that minimum standard, no matter where you're at, no matter what's going on around you. So I think that's a huge one. And then also just, championship leaders have this innate ability to be able to pull more out of others than those others would typically pull out of themselves if they were on their own, right? So they increase the level of others' performance by who they are as a leader. Big thing for me, championship leadership is something that was really important to me as a platoon leader in the military, was people, and just like really caring about your people and making sure that they knew it. And when you are super genuine in doing that, like they just can tell, right? People know whether you're being genuine or not. And that's always been a big one for me. Sometimes you'll talk to some that say, hey, you got to draw a hard line between the leaders and your people, and not cross those boundaries, not cross those lines, and not get too personal and things like that. And I've always kind of never agreed with that. I've always pushed back on that. There is absolutely 100% a time when the line needs to be drawn. And that's where championship leaders are able to do that, no matter what type of relationship what they have. And when you do that, they respect that, and they're willing to recognize in those moments, when the leader hat on or the friend hat is on.
Wow. And one thing that I love about your work and what you do, it's so funny. Like in the corporate world that I was in for so long, somebody would call themselves a leader, and they might be higher up on the org chart, but they were not doing the same, amount of work. Maybe our jobs were a little bit different in what we had to do, but you could tell they were taking it really easy on themselves. And I would say definitely not leading from the front. Why is it so important? It's like the definition of the word is to be a leader from the front, but why is that so important to actually get on the ground and do the work with the other people?
Yeah, that's been always been a huge, I guess we'll say, trait or characteristic for me as a leader, is to always be willing to do what I would ask others to do, right? Like I'm never be afraid to, like, don't talk about it and then do something completely different, right? If I'm going to ask my troops to do something, I'm always going to be willing to do that myself. So yes, there's certain job responsibilities and descriptions, or whatever you want to say, depending on where you are at in the team. And it doesn't always necessarily warrant the leader to best spend their time doing a bunch of stuff that's meant for a lower level position. But at the same time, there's opportunities where you can show up and pitch in and help out and be there with the guys, be out there when it's 140 degrees in the desert and everybody's got their gear on, right? If I'm sitting in my office where the AC is and they're outside there all day, that's just not me. That's like, I want to be out there with them going through it. If I'm asking them to do it, then I got to be willing to do it myself. So, as a coach, it's the same way. It's like, I'm never going to put anything. I do a lot of like physical experiences where we teach leadership through physical evolutions. And so I've run 100 miles. I've done 52-hour events straight through, taught by pushed by Navy SEALs and no sleep. And I've done all these different experiences. So now when I'm running a 24-hour event, like, I know darn well, and they know as well, that like, if I'm asking them to do something, they know that I've done that myself times 10, times 100.
Wow. So, getting on the ground and doing the work with your people is one way that you can help them to become better leaders. What are some other really common things you notice in the people that you work with that is kind of holding them back from becoming a better leader?
I think a big one for a lot of people is just lacking a belief, right? Maybe they're a little bit insecure in themselves. Maybe they have these thoughts, these beliefs in their mind, in their head that they're not worthy to be in that position. And the only way to really get through that is to encourage them, to build them up, to have conversation with them. So I think it really also, as a leader, comes down to the great ones have this incredible ability to be able to read their people and where they're at, right? And everyone's different. And it's also they have the ability to know how to communicate and interact with each individual, because each individual is so different, right? You can't just interact with one person the same as another on your team, because they're two completely different people that respond differently to different forms of leadership and communication. So that's where the importance of really knowing your people comes into play. And so that first day when I met my platoon for the very first time on day one of the deployment, I couldn't come in there guns a-blazing and being like, hey, I'm the leader, hear me roar, do what I tell you to do. Yes, in the military, I'm the first lieutenant, I'm the platoon leader, and they do need to follow my orders. But at the same time, to gain their respect and trust, I have to get to know these guys, and I have to take some time to really observe and listen and watch, so that I can figure out who each person is and how they respond to what. And that way I can help to build them up, when they're in those leadership opportunities and positions, to help them be the best leaders that they can be. So it really is a process, and there's a lot of factors involved.
I love that. I think a key component to all of this is also a pretty high level of resiliency. How can we make ourselves more resilient in a very, very soft and comfortable world?
You just have to put yourself in difficult, hard, uncomfortable situations, right? That's a big reason that that the physical piece is so big to me. That's a big reason that I go out and run 100-mile races, or do the SEAL Fit Kokoro, which is that 52-hour event that I talked a little bit about, because there's so much that carries over from the physical piece of things, right? To run 100 miles, man, number one, you got to be prepared. You got to have put the work in. You have to have the mindset to continue to move and push forward on mile 60 when you want to quit, when you're questioning yourself and why you're even out here and what are you doing this for, when it's hot, when it's cold, when you're tired, when your knees hurt, when you got blisters all over your feet and your toes and every step hurts, right? That's where you build resiliency, is when you go through difficult and hard times. And sometimes you don't have any control over the hard times that you go through, right? Somebody grows up in a really shitty situation in life. They didn't have any control over that. They didn't want that, but yet they're forced to become resilient because of the environment or the situation that they were placed in, right? Now, when you are out of that environment and you've been able to kind of create where you live and the income that you have and the life that you have, it's super easy to just be comfortable. And if you truly want to become resilient, you got to choose to put yourself in some of these difficult situations. It doesn't have to be physical, right? But I think, the physical is probably the best and the fastest way to build a lot of that resiliency, but you could put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You could join, if you're not a great speaker and you're afraid to get up in front of people, they have Toastmasters, right? You could join your local Toastmasters and force yourself to be a better speaker by, standing up in front of a bunch of strangers every week and giving a speech on whatever that topic is for the week. So it could be going to a networking event when you're more of an introvert and you don't naturally engage with other people, especially people that you don't really know, right? So those are all ways to build resiliency and to build skill sets that will help you out the next time you're in that similar situation, right? Every time you're in that situation, you're going to be just a little bit more comfortable. You're going to have a little bit more confidence or certainty in yourself.
I love that idea. That's so well explained and so accessible. So many different ways that you can be uncomfortable, but it's you choosing it and it's you bringing it in your life to experience it. So then you're right. Like when something big happens, you've already trained yourself to be a little cold, to be a little warm, to maybe listen a little bit more or consider somebody else's opinion that's not the same as yours, to build skills. Like you said, I think that's wonderful. One of the skills you built was running 100 miles. One of my favorite authors, I'm going to screw up his last name, Dean Karnazes. Is that how you say it?
Dean Karnazes.
Karnazes, yeah. You've had him on your show, I believe twice. He's written,
twice.
Yeah, that's awesome. He's written amazing books, and he's going to come on our show at some point. The problem is he's like always running across some continent.
Right.
can never nail him down. But in his book, especially, I would say like The Road to Sparta, he does such a great job of talking about how difficult, running 100 and 100 plus miles really truly is, and all the challenges you face and all that stuff. So I want to know, like, how did that come into your life? Was that a gradual thing, or did you just decide I'm going to run 100 miles and I'm going to start building it up right now?
Well, I would say part of it was, because of Dean Karnazes. I read one or two of his books, probably now like 12 years ago, right? Kind of when they first came out.
Yeah.
And still to this day, ask people if they know who Dean Karnazes is, and almost no one knows who he is, which again, I'm in the ultramarathon world. So people in my ultramarathon world do know him. But yeah, I remember coming across his book. I remember reading a article in Sports Illustrated, probably was the first time I had heard about people running 100 miles. And again, that was maybe 13, 14, 15 years ago. And, I just couldn't believe it. I remember, and I believe it was Scott Jurek, who was actually a guy from Minnesota where I live here. And he was doing the Badwater
yep.
35 in Death Valley. And and it was that article blew my mind and just stuck with me, right? And I think kind of in the back of my head, thought that's nuts and that's crazy. And I don't even know how anyone could do that. But that's in the back of my mind, kind of like, man, I think that might be cool to do that. And then when I went through Kokoro, I read this book by Jesse Itzler called Living with a SEAL. And in the book, so this is in 2016. In the book, he doesn't call him David Goggins. He just calls him SEAL, right? Because Goggins didn't want to be known. Well, SEAL was David Goggins. And I found out shortly after that who SEAL was. And so I started following Goggins really before he kind of hit the mainstream. Wow. And his book, Can't Hurt Me, is incredible. But I just remember in that book, right, they're talking about this dude that's just a monster and a beast that's running 100 miles. And so it was all that kind of that inspired me one day to just like, I wonder if I can do it. And that was enough to get me to sign up. I wasn't a big runner. I wasn't running marathons or anything. I really wasn't even running a couple miles at the time. And was just like, I wonder what it would take for me to be able to do that. So I just signed up. I just have that personality where it's like, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to figure it out. And that's what I did.
Wow, that's amazing. What kinds of challenges did you face in both the training and the actual event that you did?
Crazy. I mean, a ton. I wrote the book 100 Mile Mindset that really kind of explains everything that I went through. But, at the time I was working with a running coach, and I told him about it. And he's like, I love your heart. I love your spirit. But, to be honest, I don't think you have what it takes to do it. Like, I still have the text. So what he was saying is essentially like, I love your spirit, but I'm not sure that you really have what it takes. And he was just trying to be honest with me to help me to be a little bit more realistic in what I have. And obviously I was successful. It took me 3 attempts. What did I learn? Like, I learned a ton, right? The first time we missed the time cutoff, we finished 100K, which is like 63 miles. We just missed it by a couple of minutes. And we thought we were okay, right? So really, like, we hadn't paid attention to the details. And I had a support crew with me, and it could be easy to blame them, but really the responsibility comes on me. It was my race, and I should have been the one that knew this. So, I learned a ton there. You learn a ton about nutrition. You learn a ton about, like, all right, I gotta run more miles. I gotta pick up the pace. You learn how to pace yourself. You get to so many different environments, and you get to meet so many different people, you from all walks of life. And then that takes me to the second one where I made it like 76 miles and I just, I couldn't go anymore. Right. Like I had kind of met my limit for that day and not being too hard on yourself. Right. It's still an accomplishment, and your worth is never tied to like the amount of miles that you run. And those are important things to remember. And then, part of the message going back to this running coach, he was like, in order to do something like that, you got to run when you don't want to, you got to run when you don't feel like it. You got to run the miles when your knees hurt. You got to run the miles when it's cold, when it's hot, when it's wet, right? Like he was just like, you just have to, there's certain things that you're going to have to do on the days that you don't want to do it. And just about every day you're not going to want to do it. Right. And so that was kind of what he was trying to tell me. And so that did sink in, and I was able to see it for what it was really, he was trying to teach me something and not take offense to it. Right. Too many people, if you just take offense to it and be like, screw this guy, who is he? Forget him. You lose the lesson that he was really trying to get across to me. And so, man, I've learned so many different things, like a ton of resilience, a ton of perseverance, and really realizing like it's important to continually put yourself, because you see how fast you lose it when you stop, right? Who cares what I did? Who cares that I ran 100 miles if I quit and I gained 300 pounds and I become lazy and fat and useless to those around me, right? The fact that I did that years ago, like, reminds me that, that you're only really as good as your last minute. And so it's not just a one and done. Yeah, there's some lessons you can learn and carry with you, but there's like to continue to grow, to continue to not settle, and just know that, man, life's about continuing to push, and it's not about, finding the easy. That was one thing that Dean Carnazzi said on my podcast, because I asked him when he did the 50 marathons, 50 days in 50 states, the last was New York City. He finishes it. His family's ready to go home. Like, they're done. Right. And he's like, hey, you guys go ahead and fly back to California where you live. I'm going to run home. He's like, when you get to the finish line, just keep running. He's like, you keep going. There isn't a finish line. It's all about the journey. He finished and he was like empty. Right. And so he's like, I got to keep going. I didn't get it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Right. So he runs back to California. I mean, crazy.
Anybody other than him, I would question the validity of that story.
Yeah, right? I know it.
Crazy. So we've had a few ultramarathoners on, one that's up by you. I'm sure you know him, Ryan Shukuski.
No, I don't.
Oh, wow. Huh. Funny. Yeah. So he wrote a book also about ultramarathon. He's up in Minnesota, and he had the same kind of experience where he entered a run. He failed, he got pulled out of the event and was like, should I write about this? Like, I probably wouldn't write about one of my personal quote unquote failures. And he decided, kind of like you, that this is authentic and this is important. And you're right. This is where all the good stuff is. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of being open and honest and vulnerable about the times that we don't necessarily quote unquote succeed.
Well, I mean, the purpose in life is not to get to a point where you don't fail anymore, right? Like, the people that live lives of trying not to fail anymore are the ones that end up with a ton of regret when they're older, because they wish they would have done this or that. And now, guess what? Like, time is one of those things that you only get, like, you only have it once. Once it's gone, like, you can never get it back. And so, people will tend to play small. Why? Because, I don't know, many reasons. They're not sure if they're worthy to accomplish certain things. They're afraid of success. They're afraid of what might happen. Like, now they set a standard and they got to continue to live up to that. So a lot of people will play it safe and kind of shrink back into this comfortable life and play small, but really that's just a slow drip of regret over time, because they're not really doing some of the things that make them feel alive. And so there's a lot of power when you realize that failures are just those stepping stones in life to help you to help you learn and to help you to get better. And I I could have looked at it. Yes, it was a failure, and there's nothing wrong with calling it a failure the first 2 attempts. But at the same time, I can also look at it and take out the positive. 63 miles was way further than I'd ever ran in my life before. Like the people that were there to support me, like I got the time and the experience with them to do that. I learned a ton about what it takes to really be an ultramarathon runner and to be successful in 100 miles. I wouldn't have been successful on my 3rd attempt if it wasn't for those first 2, because I learned there's certain things in life that you can't learn through training. You got to learn through actually towing the starting line, right? Like stepping on the field. Theodore Roosevelt, man in the arena, right? Being the man in the arena, covered in dust and sweat and blood, and being on the field and not sitting in the cheap seats with your popcorn and Diet Coke and laughing about the guys that are actually on the field playing and about how they should be doing things different, right? Now, like you get in the field, you step on the starting line, and that's how you learn. Some things you just don't learn unless you experience them.
Man, that is so well explained, dude. I'm so like wired up right now. Like I want to go punch a grizzly bear or something.
Let's go.
Wow. That's amazing. We had a former world record holder in the free dive. Her name is Tanya Streeter, who dove to like 526 feet below the surface of the water on a single breath. And she had, amazing. She had a quote that I've never forgotten that just said, "I have learned nothing from success. Anytime I've had success, I learned nothing. Everything of any kind of value that I have learned in my life came from failure." So, man, I think that's just so super well explained. You had the honor of hosting somebody who, man, I'm so jealous. He's been so influential in my life. I know he's been influential in yours. I have his book sitting about 6 inches away from my head right now, The War of Art. You got to interview Stephen Pressfield. What? Yeah. Dude, what was that like?
It was awesome. It's incredible. That's what I love about my podcast more than anything. It's pretty selfishly is like just having the opportunity to have some of these folks on my podcast and to be able to get to know them and interview them and ask some questions that like I really look up to and that have impacted me, and they don't even know it, right? Stephen Pressfield is definitely one of those. The very first book that I ever read from him was called Gates of Fire. And I read it when I was deployed in Kuwait. And it was just this incredible book. And then I come back and the movie 300 comes out, which I thought the movie was made after his book, Gates of Fire. But when I interviewed him, he was like, no, that actually wasn't. I was like, oh, weird. But anyways, and then I started to find out that he had actually written like some personal development stuff. And I was, I'm a coach and I'm always looking to learn and grow. And The War of Art was one of my top books that I read that every year. Like I recommend that to clients and people all the time. And so it was just awesome. He's just an incredible dude, right? He was just very gracious, very, very down to earth, and just a very fun conversation.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I reached out to him to do an interview, and his team emailed me back immediately, and they said, no, he's too busy right now, but here's a copy of his book. Thanks for reaching out. Like, dude, what a class act. It's so cool.
Definitely.
War of Art especially, talks about the resistance. And this is something that pushes against us whenever we want to try to make our lives go vertical, whenever we want to create something, we want to grow, we want to become more generous, whatever it is that is improving our lives. We meet this thing that, doesn't want us to pursue it, or we're definitely going to pursue it, but not until tomorrow, so we procrastinate. And then, the second part of the book talks a lot about overcoming the resistance by the things that you were talking about by preparing for that race. Like, there are going to be days that you don't want to run. There are going to be times when editing a podcast is a little tedious. There are going to be times when, it's raining or it's cold or whatever, but a professional sits down and does the work every single day, regardless of the quality, and they get over it. I'm curious, what kinds of resistance are you feeling in your own personal life right now?
Yeah, that's, like you just said, turning pro, and he's even got a book called Turning Pro. But
that's what he sent me. It was great.
Okay.
So good.
Oh yeah. Awesome. What challenge, man, again, it's just like failures. There's never a lack of challenges inside of our life. And as we it's the saying that, I don't know if you've heard this or not, but like new level, new devil, right? So there's always a new set of challenges as you continue to grow and to, I guess, ascend the ladder in life, right? Some of the challenges right now, it's, growing a business during, still kind of a pandemic going on and crazy times in our world. I run live events. And so, it's like it's challenging to run live events when people can't travel, are still maybe a little hesitant to travel, although it's definitely opened up. And everything that's going on in the world, along with the fact that, married and I got 3 kids and they're growing and time goes fast, and trying to figure out how to be a parent and a father and a husband. And man, the challenges never end and never cease. But that's part of the journey. Like, that was a huge realization for me when I really realized, because I think for a long time we're kind of programmed that, like, you grow up, you go to school, you get married, you get the house, you have the kids, and you get the career that you want. And like, and life is easy, and then you get to that point and you realize that in the back of your mind, you're thinking, man, I'm trying to get to this place where life is great and there's no challenges. And you realize that, like, there is no such as no challenges. And if I can just prepare myself and equip myself with the tool set and the skill set, to be prepared when those challenges arise. Like, I'm almost looking for those challenges. You're almost looking forward to them, because, on the other side of any challenge that you're able to navigate and get through, number one, you're going to learn a lot no matter what happens. And number two, on the other side of that challenge, it usually comes some kind of a prize or a reward, right? And so it's just continuing to get a little bit better, and then just continuing to equip yourself when those challenges do arise, because you know that they're coming.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that, because that was an interesting realization, realizing that the resistance is the signpost that tells you you're going in the right direction, and to push into it, to lean in, to, realize the obstacle is the way, or whatever, however you want to say it. Like, when you feel fear, when you feel something that, just makes your stomach turn a little bit, that's it. Like, do it.
Yeah. You're exactly where you should be. Right. Yeah.
That's amazing. Curious to know these days, what are some of the other healthy, like, lifestyle attributes you incorporate? It sounds like you're pretty fit and doing a lot as far as workouts. What other things do you incorporate?
Yeah, it's important. I'm a simple man, and I like to keep things simple. Us as human beings, we tend to think that if it's too simple, we just make it a little bit more complex, and it must work better, right? And when we try to make things complex, that's when things fall apart, and we kind of go back to our old lowest level of training. So, it's important to take care of our body, to eat right, to work out, and you just got to do that every day. You just make it, like Joe Rogan said, like, I don't have to think about brushing my teeth. I don't have to think about eating, right? Working out should be the same. Like, you just do it. You just get up every day and you just work out, because it's important. If you want to be around for your kids, you want to be healthy, COVID comes around or something like that comes around, you're better off if your body is equipped and kind of weaponized to be able to handle it and be healthy, to do so. So I'm always working out. I'm always trying to watch what I eat, and I'm not perfect. Like, there's days where I fall off, or there's days where I might miss a workout, but I don't let it crush me. I just get up and do it again the next day. I meditate. That's been a game changer for me. It's something that I've put into practice really for about the last 6 years. And that's been a game changer for me. I invest in relationships more so on a daily basis than I ever have. And that just pays dividends. You just water the relationships that you want to grow, and you can do that easily nowadays with our cell phones. I mean, it takes almost zero effort and seconds to send a message to somebody just to say, hey, I was thinking about you. I hope you're doing well. Right. So it's just all those little things. I make sure I plan out my day every day. Right. A lot of people know that that's important and a good thing and something that they should do, but they just don't sit down and take 5 to 10 minutes every day to do it. Right. And it's just all the little things that I try to incorporate in my day to set myself up for success. And the earlier I set up myself for success in the day, the more likely that I am going to have a good day. And we have a bunch of good days in a row. Like, it's pretty hard to not win in life and be happy.
Totally. Wow. Yeah, totally. I love that. I notice a bit of a tendency with people that get into the space that you're in where, they are pushing hard, they are working out, there's a lot of doing, and there comes to be a point where there's almost like this burnout, and the hard lesson learned that there also needs to be being. And so I'm really glad you mentioned meditation. What other things help you relax and recharge so that you can go as hard as you need to when the time comes?
Sleep. Sleep is huge. Like, really, it is. And I've realized the importance of, when I have 8 to even 9 hours of sleep, I'm at my best. And you even see it in more and more nowadays. There's a lot of people talking about sleep. There's a lot of people, sleep experts on podcasts. I believe even Jeff Bezos now makes sure he gets, I want to say it's 9 hours of sleep a night. Like, the guy that pushed and hustled and grinded so hard realized that it really wasn't super healthy and efficient for him to do that. And now you got the guy that's one of the wealthiest men in the world making sure he gets 9 hours of sleep. Even, Gary Vee is kind of that guy you look as a hustle and grinder. And I've heard him talk about numerous times of how it's important that he gets his 7 to 8 a day. And so that's a huge one for me, sleep.
Yeah. Gotcha. No, that's great. It's nice to, understand that it's not a negative. It's not doing nothing. You are contributing in a positive way. Another thing that can be challenging, and I struggle with this all the time. This is a very selfish question, but how do you know when the end of the day is and when you've done enough?
Yeah, that's something that I think we all struggle with, because I think that the best, I just had this conversation, a client of mine, and I think a lot of people are experiencing this right now. So it's probably actually a really great, timely question, because there is such a shortage of jobs right now. There's not a shortage of jobs, but a lot of companies are short-staffed, right? For whatever reason, pandemic, whatever. So my client, she's extremely short-staffed right now, and it's hard to find people to work. And so they're having to pick up the slack for positions that would normally be there and if filled would take up that slack. And so she's finding herself like extremely booked, compromising her time to work out, compromising time with her family, compromising her sleep, all for this job. And let's be realistic, for this company that if it ever came down to it and they needed to make cuts, would make the cut, right? And so she's sacrificing all of this for something that we all know that we'll look back on, and when it comes down to it, won't be the things that we'll have regret over. Like, you're never going to regret wishing you would have worked more. You're going to regret the experiences that you lost out on with the time that you lost out on with the people that matter most to you. And so you just really got to be have your priorities in check, and know that no matter how much you do, there's always going to be more to be done the next day, right? Like, no matter what you do in a day, have your priorities set. Like, what's really most important to you? There's a difference between, just calling it a day and going home when you still have a bunch to do, and protecting the things that are important to you, right? You could still work 8 hours a day and be super productive, be super intentional and focused in that time that you're there. And then being like, hey, now it's time for me to go work out, because that's going to help me have the energy, the drive, and the focus to show up the next day and do it again. As well as, hey, now it's time to spend time with my family, the people that I love the most and that care about me and just want my time and attention. Because I know my kids are 13, 11, and 9. I only have my 9-year-old, I only have 9 more years with, which is crazy. I only have 4 or 5 more years with my 13-year-old, and she's got, like, hopefully, obviously they're always going to be a part of my life, but that I really have time with them on a day-to-day basis before they hopefully leave my house when they're 18 and go on to become adults and go to school or whatever it is that they choose to do. Right. Like I realize right now like the time that I have. And I'm trying to take advantage of that. And no way in hell do I want to look back and be like, man, I messed up. Man, I wish I would have just came home every night and made sure that I had the time with them. Man, I wish I would have went to the games. I do not want that. So I'm just really aware of that. And I'm really aware of what's important to me. And that's the way to do it.
Wow. I love that. What a thoughtful explanation and answer. Yeah, what a great thing to consider and really try to appreciate, because that hourglass is, sand's going. We have this time now and we don't ever get it back, and to really try to appreciate the things that are most important and really prioritize those and let the other things just kind of fall away, I think is wonderful advice. That's great. What is one thing that you would like to leave as your legacy?
I wrote a book called Live Your Legacy. And it's just really about, because a lot of people talk about leaving a legacy, and that's like something that you're going to give to others when you're gone, right? And again, kind of coming back to that theme of it's of Dean Carnazzi, and you get to the finish line and he's like, keep going. It's enjoying, because it's a journey, and I'm just really present on this journey that I'm on. I know that nothing's guaranteed. Like I could go home today and die in a car accident, right? Like that could happen. I sure as heck hope not. But, there's no guarantees to what happens. And so legacy, like what I leave as a legacy, more than like a financial windfall for my family is hopefully an example that my family can be proud of how I lived and who I was as a person.
Yeah, fantastic. Man, this has been an awesome conversation. Nate, if you had to leave the listener with one simple tip that they could plug into their life, very similar to the last question I know you asked most of your people, what would you want that one thing to be?
Yeah, I would say, just like no matter who you've been or the decisions you've made up until now, just know that like if you want to make a change, it doesn't even matter. You can just decide today to make that shift, whether it's, working out, whether it's losing a little bit of weight, whether it's going after that job or that career that you always in the back of your mind wanted to, or starting that business, right? Or mending a relationship that maybe isn't, where you hoped it would be, right? Like, just, commit, decide today that, hey, I'm going to do something that's going to move me forward towards that. Don't try and bite off the whole elephant in one chunk. Like just take little small steps every single day. If, like I said, if you screw up and you miss a day or you fall off track a day, don't let it become 2 days. Just be like, that's all right. Don't beat yourself up. Today, I'm going to get back at it. So whatever it is that you want to improve, don't try and conquer the world and make 50 different changes all at once, because that's just a formula for disaster and failure and setback. But just, choose one thing. Again, talking about priorities, what's really the most important to you? Go after that thing a little bit at a time every single day. And if you continue to do that day after day over a long period of time, eventually you're going to look back and you're going to realize, holy cows, I've made a lot of progress. I've done it. I did it. And now what's next?
I love it. Best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. That's tremendous advice. I really love that thoughtful answer and just such great advice. Nate Bailey, where do you want people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, the best place is go to my website, go to natebailey.org. You can connect with me on social media there. You can get a free copy of my ebook, my audiobook, 100 Mile Mindset. You can check out the podcast and everything else that I'm up to right there.
Awesome. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Nate Bailey, thank you so very much for your drive and your passion and for creating these wonderful programs and sharing content, sharing your message. It really does make an impact. Your podcast is amazing. Highly recommend the listener go over there. Make sure you give it a rating and review on Apple. Nate Bailey, thank you so much for all of that. And thank you so much for appearing on our show today. We really, really appreciate you and all of your work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.